Ukraine recapturing every square centimeter of Ukrainian territory and evicting the Russians, all Russians from Ukraine. That would be a total victory. Victory doesn't necessarily come like that. Wars don't necessarily come like that. So it may be that a 60%, a 70%, an 80% solution would be good enough. What is critical is that the Ukrainians recapture enough ground, enough of their own territory, to ensure that Russia cannot in future prey on them and be a long-term security threat. However, even if that happens, we have to assume Russia will continue to be a threat to Ukraine and a threat to Europe, because there will be no peace in Europe while the bloodstained autocrat Putin is in the Kremlin or a lookalike takes over from him. And that places an imperative on NATO to gear up for a long-term generational deterrence of Russia. It's taken a heck of a long time. But armor and tanks are really important because you cannot take ground, recapture ground, unless you put your infantry on it and you kill, capture, or force the withdrawal of the enemy who's occupying it. And the only way you're going to get them forward is under armor, protected mobility, led forward and supported by tanks in the direct fire battle. Yes, of course, attack helicopters, air, and all the other long-range precision missiles are critical. But when it comes to mixing it with the enemy, tanks are fundamental. And America has provided by far the greatest weight of arms, ammunition, and very high capability precision missiles like HIMARS. I mean, let's be clear. The M1 Abrams is a superb tank, and it would be very, very well suited to operating in the eastern steppes of Ukraine. But it's a serious gas guzzler. It's got a gas turbine engine. It's heavy. It's got a huge logistic demand. And I think the logistic demand on the Ukrainians would unbalance their forces. So Leopard, 2,000 or so in Europe. The Germans have got something like 200 in storage. And it would be easy to train Ukrainian crews to use it. And of course, it's here. It's on this side of the Atlantic. So it makes much more sense for the Germans to provide their tanks. And of course, let's be clear, it would be very good if the British could provide more. The British have taken the lead with 14 Challenger 2, but that's only a squadron's worth. We need to see at least 2 or 3 battle groups worth of Challenger 2 tanks. But the truth that needs to be told, which government ministers are unwilling to acknowledge, is that the evisceration of the British armed forces over the last 20 years means that there is precious little in the cupboard. I commanded a Challenger 1 tank squadron in the first Gulf War. It's a very capable tank and more than a match for anything the Russians have got with its night sights and the sort of ammunition it's got. Frankly, it all depends on how much of the weaponry and equipment that Ukraine needs can be provided. If the Ukrainians get 100% of what they need and quickly, then I think there is a very real chance that they could defeat the Russians in 2023. If they don't, and it's a sort of mathematical equation, if they get 60%, then the proportion of ground they capture goes down. And if they don't get what they want, Robert could well be right that this could stretch well into 2024. That highlights the imperative of giving them what they need and now and quickly.
All the indications that I've seen, and it's on open source stuff on intelligence on Twitter and the like, suggest that the Ukrainians are responded pretty quickly, having picked up Russian soldiers logging on to the Ukrainian mobile system. The Ukrainians picked that up very quickly and were able to direct a devastating HIMARS long-range missile strike against the Russian site. I think it's worth saying that these are legitimate. This is a legitimate target. These were Russian soldiers. They have invaded Ukraine, and they were hell-bent on either attacking more Ukraine or defending more of Ukraine. And so this is entirely justifiable by the Ukrainians and set against a context in which Ukrainian civilians have consistently continued to be targeted, murdered, and struck by rockets from the Russians. This is entirely justifiable, however grim it is. And in terms of the casualties, all the indications are that the casualties are way in excess of the 89 or so that the Russians are admitting. It's an admission by the Russians that they've had a defeat. They are trying to They're trying to bound this. They're trying to ensure that this does not cause more humiliation for Russia than it will do. And they're desperate to demonstrate that this has not been the catastrophic defeat that the Ukrainians have inflicted on them. But that's not going to wash, frankly. And the Russians are looking, incompetent. The fact that their battlefield discipline, their level of training is not up to controlling the use of mobile phones in a war zone, which is pretty basic stuff. And the fact that their strategic communications is frankly so inept all indicates that Russia is very firmly on the back foot. Yeah. Number one, Putin is absolutely considering a long haul, and we have to assume that we've got to be prepared for a long haul. And the so what out of that is that we've got to knuckle down. This thing is not going to go away, and the way to stop it being a long haul is to give the Ukrainians the offensive maneuver and military capability that they need, to give them the ammunition they need, and give them the support they need. I think the reality is that the West is still expecting Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind its back. The Western support has been far too slow and far too little. Yes, the Ukrainians have been given an enormous amount of capability, but until they get the tanks, the infantry fighting vehicles, the artillery, I mean, the Ukrainians, they're talking about 300 tanks, 500 artillery pieces, umpteen hundred other armored vehicles. Without that, the Ukrainians are going to be very hard pushed to really mount the offensive maneuver capability they need in order to retake Ukrainian territory. And that's a long time coming. Plus, of course, ammunition. And if there's one message to get home, the amount of ammunition being used is staggering. The ammunition scales being used completely stymie any assumptions post-Cold War. These are massive Second World War levels of ammunition usage. And the West needs to be tooling up its industrial capacity to really give Ukraine the ammunition it needs. I think we're so focused on sort of contemplating our internal navals in this country that we fail to recognize the massive strategic challenge that this Ukraine war is posing to the West and globally as well. And this is not going to go away. We cannot put our heads in the sand. We need to really wake up and recognize that 2023 should be the deciding year, and it will be the deciding year if we give the Ukrainians the support they need. And meanwhile, the Ukrainians are taking it on the chin in an extraordinarily resilient way. Mission accomplished when Ukraine has achieved its military objectives, and that means ejecting every Russian soldier from Ukraine. And let's be clear, anything less than that is not going to be full mission accomplished. But to achieve that, it depends on a whole range of variables. Nobody can foresee how this war will go this year. But we can reduce the risk of Ukraine not achieving its military objectives if we give Ukraine the tools to do the job. If China stays relatively neutral, as it has thus far, if President Biden, President Zelensky's leadership, strategic leadership, can maintain the support of the West and Ukrainian people, particularly the West, to ensure that the what you might call the appeasers who are looking for a diplomatic solution, which effectively gives Russia a chunk of Ukraine, can be shouted down.